All right. Hello and welcome back to another session. This is part of StartUpNV's SBIR workshop for today and for tomorrow. Next, we have Jerry Hollister from BBC ETC. He is going to be talking about screening clients for SBIR and STTR funding. So specifically, entrepreneurial support organizations who are interested in how to match clients to funding agencies. This is really a fantastic talk for you. Jerry has over 30 years of leadership experience in government, higher education, nonprofit, and for-profit enterprises. After earning an engineering degree from the University of Michigan, he served as a naval officer and warranted contracting officer for the DoD. So, Jerry, thank you so much for being here.
A pleasure to be here with you all and present. And I do just briefly about BBC ETC. We're a SBIR, STTR support organization. We work all across the country. We work mostly in SBIR, STTR, but we also do other, non-dilutive funding opportunities from the federal government. As Kara said, I started my career as a naval officer, became a warranted contracting officer, was in small business for a decade prior to joining BBC ETC, which was about 7 years ago now, almost 7 years ago. And I helped lead the program at this small business that went from, when I started, it's about 12 of us. Now there's 120, still on the board of directors. Was very successful in it. SBIR won over $20 million worth of awards, and then subsequently helped. I helped pull in another 30 million in phase 3 awards subsequent to leaving, because I still am on the board and I still help out, and then probably another 15 million while I was. So pretty extensive experience on both sides of being in small business and in the government. And at BBC, I serve as a reviewer for several of the agencies: NSF, DOE, USDA, and NOAA. So pretty extensive background. Just kind of to level set, and I know that this is really geared towards those of you that are economic, or the entrepreneurial support organizations, really trying to help identify who's a good fit for SBIR, SBIR, STTR, sometimes called SBIR. Just kind of level set, what is the program? For $4.5 billion this year in 2023. Get my laser pointer working. Big picture has to involve innovation, and it's a product development program. Okay, it has to produce a product or a service, because at its very essence, it's a job creation program. So there has to be. This is not basic research. There has to be an applied product at the end of it. And SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research, STTR, Small Business Technology Transfer. Mandated by Congress, and there's the funding comes from the agency itself. It's not in a separate appropriation. So if SBIR, STTR disappeared today, it's authorized through 2025, but if it disappeared after 2025, it wouldn't save a nickel in the federal budget. All that would happen is all that money would go to big business instead of being a small business set aside. The way the program is funded, if a federal agency has $100 million or above R&D budget, then they have to participate in SBIR, and 11 agencies qualify. If they have $1 billion, if the agency has $1 billion or more in R&D, then they have to participate in both SBIR and STTR. And there's 6 of the 11 agencies qualify for both and offer both programs. And then the SBA oversees the program. So again, product development, there has to be a product at the end of the day. So as you're talking with the group that's in front of you, you're going to want to make sure that there is a product, that there is technological innovation. We're going to kind of dive into it a little bit more here as we go through, as you're asking questions to screen. And there has to be a credible commercialization strategy. And depending on the agency, the emphasis of that commercialization strategy does vary, but in all cases, it can't just be basic research. There has to be a sales point for this innovation in the future. There are 11 agencies, as I mentioned. There are the 6 that participate in both SBIR and STTR. DoD is over half the program. Health and Human Services, which is mostly NIH, but also includes CDC and FDA, is a little over a quarter. Then the other big agencies are Energy, National Science Foundation, NASA, and Agriculture, USDA. Then the small agencies over here, Homeland Security, Transportation, Education, NOAA and NIST are both part of Commerce. And then EPA bringing up the smallest of the SBIR agencies. It's a 3-phase program. Phase 1 is a feasibility study, basically a proof of concept, generally 6 to 12 months. And it's usually around $250,000. Some of the smaller agencies a little less. Some of the bigger agencies can offer more, but usually around $250,000, and 6 to 12 months, prove the concept will work. Once the company gets that phase 1 award and they prove that it works, they can apply for phase 2. Phase 2 is basically you're going to develop this product and with the goal of reaching an MVP, minimum viable product, at the end of phase 2. And so that's generally, it's almost always 2 years and generally between $1 million and $2 million. Again, some of the smaller agencies a little less. Bigger agencies actually have additional funding beyond the initial phase 2. They can offer supplemental or sequential phase 2s. Then phase 3 and the phase 1 and phase 2 are funded through the SBIR STTR program. So the set aside from the agency budgets that I mentioned fund the phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 3, on the other hand, is when the company is selling their product. And if they're going to sell to the government, then it has to come from a non-SBIR budget line. And I'll give an example of that in a couple minutes. Big difference between SBIR and STTR. Again, big picture here to level set basic understanding. SBIR allows for the involvement of a research institute. STTR requires the involvement of a research institute, and a research institute is basically a university or a national lab, and so STTR requires that involvement, and SBIR allows but does not require. Excuse me. Under SBIR, the company must do at least 67.0% of the work. They can go all the way up to 100%. Under STTR, the small business must do at least 40% of the work, and the research institute must do at least 30% of the work, meaning by the budget, percentage of the budget. And then there's that in between where there's a lot of flexibility. And so those are the biggest differences between SBIR and STTR. The rest of the requirements are all the same. Okay, so with that kind of basic understanding of the program, how then do you as an entrepreneurial support organization start to figure out, is this company that's sitting in front of me that came into my office today, are they really a good fit for SBIR, STTR? So we're going to go through a series of questions, and if you keep answering yes, then they're a good fit. And if there's an answer is no, somewhere along the line, some of these off ramps are kind of a dead end. There's no way to get back into the SBIR pipeline. Some of them can be fixed, and I'll mention those along the way. And then there's a few kind of general areas that we're going to look at, these 6 that I have listed here. So in the slides, the orange slides are kind of decision points. They're questions that you're going to ask, and then we'll keep moving through the questionnaire. The first is, are they eligible? Okay, there's basic eligibility requirements that we're going to go through, And if the answer is yes, great, we'll keep going. If the answer is no, there could be a way to solve that. Or if they can't, if they're, for example, a not-for-profit company, then they have to go find a partner that is eligible. So what are those basic requirements? Company has to be for-profit, could be any kind of for-profit. They have to be U.S. owned and controlled, meaning that over 50% of their ownership is U.S. citizens or permanent residents, green card holders. They have to have less than 500 employees located in the United States. All the R&D must be done in the United States. They have to have company-controlled research space adequate to complete the research being proposed. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then they have to have up-to-date registrations. So they meet all those requirements. Great. Let's keep asking questions to see if they're if they're really a good fit. So one of the big requirements is they have to have R&D facilities adequate to do the research being proposed. So that varies greatly depending on what the company is trying to develop. So if they're doing drug development, for example, they're going to need a lot of facilities. If they're doing software development, probably all they need is a internet connection and a server or a pretty high heavy duty computer. So it really depends. But the bottom line is they have to have control of those facilities, and they have to meet the requirements. The company I came from, we produce superconducting accelerators. That using that superconducting accelerator, we produce medical radioisotopes. And so there was a lot of infrastructure that we needed to have in place just to qualify for the SBIR program. So if they don't have facilities, then they're going to need to either find some facilities and get it under their control, or partner with an organization that has those facilities. So what does it mean to have the facilities under their control? Could be a lease, could be a contract, a subcontract. There's lots of ways to have it under. You could own it. That's obvious. It's under your control then. So there's lots of different allowable relationships. But that is one of the basic requirements. Okay, so I see a question has come in. What if you have an innovative technology that has a de minimis risk in becoming a product? So I think what you're asking is if you have something you're developing that's got a very low chance of becoming a product, it's probably not going to be a good fit for the program. And we're going to get to that here in a second. And then I see, okay, I'm monitoring the chat. Yes, I am. So, okay. So feel free to throw questions in there if you have them. Okay, so company has to have facilities adequate to do the research. So the next question is the company solving an important problem? And this comes to kind of the question that David just posed, and that is, okay, so. All right, let's go. Is there an important problem? If there's not an important problem they're solving, it could be a good science fair project, could satisfy your own curiosity, but it's not going to be a good fit for SBIR or STTR. Okay, so how would you know whether or not it's there's a problem or not? Well, the company sitting in front of you should be able to articulate an important problem they're solving. Who has this problem? That's going to define their customer. How do they deal with it currently? They're dealing with it somehow. It may be a lousy solution, but they have a solution today. That's going to define the competition that the company has. How does this company compare? What's their value proposition? And then how many people have this problem is going to describe how large the market is. So if they can't describe who their customer is, they can't describe the competition, the value proposition that they're offering, and the size of the market, then there's a pretty good chance they don't have an important problem they're trying to solve, and it's probably not, and it won't be a good fit for the SBIR STTR program. And so I think that gets to the question that you're asking, David, about, is this solving an important problem or not? If it's not going to solve a problem, then it's not a good fit. So now the next question is it technically innovative? Now, there's lots of innovation. My favorite example, I'll date myself here, back in the 70s, the pet rock. Super innovative. Guy made gazillions of dollars on the pet rock, but there's no technology there. Okay, there's lots of viable business opportunities that involve something innovative, but it's not going to be a good fit for SBIR STTR. SBIR STTR has to have innovation as a part of the underlying technology that is enabling this new product or service. So it has to involve innovation. Now, what's innovation? Okay, things that have never been done before. Revolutionary, cutting edge, push forwards the state of the art, pushes forward the standard of care. Those kind of, you got to be able to say with a straight face, or this company that's sitting in front of you has got to be able to say with a straight face, this is unprecedented. It's pioneering. It's never been done. Those kinds of things. If they are saying to you, well, this is an incremental change to existing technology, or we're just adapting technology from market A into market B, then that's probably not a good fit for SBIR, okay? Because that's going to be considered evolutionary. And so that's not, generally speaking, going to be a good fit for the SBIR program. And I put down here the difference between a science and an engineering problem, okay? And so an engineering problem, these are both technical problems. Both of them can be very expensive and be very complicated and very difficult to solve, but they're different in their essence for a couple reasons, okay? And there's some implications for that. An engineering problem is one where all of the formulas and the equations and the reactions and the processes are generally accepted and well-founded. They're proven out and they're well-founded and they're accepted. Still can be very difficult. Science problem, on the other hand, the equations, the processes, the reactions, the technologies, they're not generally accepted. They're not proven out. And so the risk of a science problem is you could have the best brains in the world working on it and it still might not work because you haven't proven that it's going to work the way you intend it to. Engineering problem, the risk of an engineering problem, on the other hand, is can you marshal the right resources, which means the right people and maybe right equipment or facilities to solve this problem that we have the solution for, but we still gotta implement that problem. So they're very different and they have different kinds of risks. SBIR, generally speaking, you should be able, or the company should be able to articulate a science problem that's being solved, that there's this proof of concept study in phase 1, and then the engineering problems wait for phase 2. Again, generally speaking. Now, I see a question here. Previously submitted to NSF, received a template email which mentioned it wasn't a good fit. Does this mean I shouldn't submit again targeting SBIR STTR? So I believe what you're referring to there is what's known as the project pitch. If you got a rejected project pitch, it would depend on what they said. You can resubmit a new idea to the NSF through the project pitch process. But what I would do is get in touch with somebody like Cara and her team there that can give you some specific input. We could give you specific input. There's plenty of people that do this that could give you some input on how to best frame your problem statement so that you clearly, particularly at NSF, they want to see a clear science problem in your project. So if you defined it more as an engineering problem, then they probably said that it's not a good fit. So next question here is, what if you have an idea, a marketing plan, and you know how to bring your idea to life, but you don't have the finances to do so? Well, that's what the whole point of the SBIR STTR is all about. Is they will fund, SBIR STTR will fund that development so that you can start getting to that point of an MVP. So yes, I would think that that is absolutely the point of bridging that valley of death. You don't have the finances to develop it, but you got a great idea, but you can't raise money until you show that it works. And so you get into this chicken and egg. Well, SBIR can help bridge that. So great question. All right. So next question to ask. We assume that they've got a technology that's not a pet rock situation. Okay. So is this a commercial? Is there a viable commercial opportunity? And if there is not, that's basically basic research, right? Research for the sake of knowledge. And there's lots of funding sources out there for basic research, but it's not SBIR STTR. Because remember, SBIR STTR, product development, job creation. So if there's not a commercial opportunity out there, not a good fit. How does one know whether there's a good commercial opportunity or not? Well, the person sitting in front of you should be able to articulate that, yes, they've gone out there and they started talking to people, and they've gotten people convinced that that there is actually a commercial opportunity. Talk to customers, they like the idea, they're willing to pay for it, or they're at least interested in it. And these are third-party validations. Okay, this is not, the university that you're working with that's going to get a quarter of the SBIR award amount. Of course, they're going to say that's a wonderful idea because they stand to benefit from it. So, third-party validations here. Biggest mistake, and I've done it, is that a lot of companies make is they go out and they develop their product. Takes them a couple of years, they go develop it, and then they go find out who's interested. They start asking, "Hi, are you interested?" And that's known as technology push. And then, because what happens is, this is what happened to us, we go out and start asking, and they're like, "Well, can it do A, B, and C?" And we're like, "Shoot, it can only do A and B." And they go, "Well, we're not interested until it can do C." And so then you got to go back and start developing it again, or putting on features or whatever. And then it's just an inefficient, naive process. It's known as technology push. You develop a technology and then go push it. What's going to make for a solid SBIR project is, no, you've actually gone out, engaged with customers, figured out that there is a product market fit, and you've got these customers engaged so that they're helping you develop the technology in a way that they're willing to pay for it. So you go out and start saying, "Well, I see you've got this problem. We've got this solution. It can do A, B, and C." And they say, "Great, but we want it also to do D and E." So you incorporate D and E here before you finish development, and then the customer's all wound up. They're all excited. They're like, "Oh man, this can do A, B, C, D, and E, and we need that, and we need it now. I don't want to wait 2 years for this. What the heck are you doing?" And that generates what's known as market pull. The market is pulling that technology out of the developer because they've engaged early and often, and they've developed the right features and the right bells and whistles that have been validated by the marketplace, so that they know that they have a sellable product. Okay. All right. So, all right. Question. In terms of science versus engineering, got a client that's spinning a technical development off from UNLV. Is this too far along for phase one? Hard to say based on what you just told me. Probably not, because there's still a lot of development. you still got, even though they've got some basic kind of like preliminary data, there's still probably a lot that has to be proven in a relevant marketplace. Just because it works in the lab doesn't mean it's a sellable product, and there's a lot of technology development that's required. So hard to say based on what you just told or what you wrote in there, Kyle, but my guess is it's probably a decent fit. But it really, it always depends. Okay, so there's a lot of nuance here. Okay, so figured out that we're tracking along. Yes, they're eligible. They got facilities. They're solving a problem. Okay, is there an agency that's interested in the problem? Because if there's not an agency interested in the problem, it might still be a good business opportunity, but it ain't going to be SBIR, STTR, because no agency that funds it is interested in this problem. So how does this company sitting in front of you, how do they figure this out? Well, first of all, there's lots of differences between the agencies. There's 11 different agencies. Each one of those agencies runs their SBIR program or STTR program slightly differently than the others. Some of them make their awards as contracts. Some make them as grants. The major difference between the contracting agencies and the granting agencies, there's differences in how you get paid. There's differences of, how many cycles each agency has per year. Some have 3, like DoD has 3 cycles per year where you can submit proposals, and a whole bunch of other ones that are what they call out of cycle. NSF and NIH both have 3 submission windows or deadlines per year. Other agencies only have 1 per year. So there's a lot of differences. The last time I checked, first of all, there's 11 different agencies. DoD has 14 different components that all, what's a component? Army, Navy, Air Force, DARPA. Those are all different components. 14 different components. NIH has 28 different institutes and centers that offer the programs. The last time I looked, I think it was up to almost 60 different ways that SBIR, STTR is implemented, depending on which agency and which component or institute you're working with. So there's a lot of variation. So how does one figure this out? Well, before I move on, the one major difference between the contracting and granting agencies is the contracting agencies generally speaking, have a very refined, highly focused topic that solves a specific problem that like DoD wants a widget that can go on the F-35, a new sensor that can do A, B, C, and D that goes on the F-35. And because they're going to develop it under SBIR, STTR, their phase 3 opportunity is the F-35 program would then acquire that technology once it's developed through SBIR, STTR. But the F-35 program in phase 3 has to fund it. Remember, phase 1 and phase 2 come out of the SBIR bucket, or the SBIR dollars. Phase 3 comes out of a program budget. NASA, same thing. I heard it stated once, there's 16 different SBIR, STTR technologies on the Mars rover. So NASA developed all these technologies under SBIR, STTR, but then Mars rover budget line acquired that technology and then further implemented it in the Mars rover. So that's the big difference. The granting agencies, on the other hand, they're not going to buy the technology. So there's not that opportunity. So how do you figure these out, though? Okay, so best way is to just go to sbir.gov, and this links to all 11 agencies. It lists past, present solicitations. You can look at past awards. And so the best way is to just drop down on the search, and you can go to past awards. It'll take you over to this dialog box, and you can type in keywords up here, or this company that's sitting in front of you should have done this, and if not, you can help them through it. And And so, fill in these keywords, and then it'll spit out a bunch of previous awards. So that's how they can figure out whether an agency is interested or not. And so when there's a hit like this, well, and then this search engine can then do a bunch of filtering. If you want to filter by what year it was, program, SBIR, STTR, phase 1, phase 2, even down to the state. So when there's a hit, if you put a keyword up here and then it spits out these different previous awards, there's a lot of information in each one of these, when it returns those from the query. And it'll tell you what agency was awarding that funding. It'll tell you what program, SBIR, STTR, it tells you the year. It tells you the title of the proposal that was funded. It tells you the topic. And if you click on that title, then it even gives you more information, including an abstract, the principal investigator, other points of contact at that company. So if you want to contact them and see if there could be an opportunity to collaborate, or maybe there's lots of information. Okay, I see a couple questions have come in. Can I clarify, if people want to buy the solution as it is being developed, is that allowed or not allowed with SBIR? That can be a really solid market validation that, yeah, there is a market opportunity. Matter of fact, people are wanting to buy it now as we develop it. And so that is a really helpful, in most cases, that's a very helpful validation that there's a market opportunity. You get into a little bit of, well, if you've already developed it to the point where there's, people are buying it, what do you need SBIR to develop a proof of concept and or minimum viable product? But if it's a pre-order, or if it's maybe it's a beta test kind of situation, that's a really strong, that's how I would frame it, is that this is a early alpha version or maybe even beta version that's proving out the concept in a relevant environment. And so, yes, it would still qualify. Great question. And then the next one, when you apply for the program, do you pitch the idea first, and then if you get interested customers, you can enter phase 2? So that's a good question. It depends. Each of the agencies handle phase 1 versus phase 2, and when they want to see customer engagement slightly differently. Generally speaking, I would say, yes, you're going to make a proposal. You're going to show that there's a proof of concept, and that you're going to get customers validating this commercial opportunity during phase 1 and phase 2. And again, depending on the agency, some want to see much earlier customer validation. Some, like NSF, they really want to see solid customer validation early. DoD, they don't really care as much, as long as it solves their problem for the warfighter. They're not as concerned about the customer validation, because they are the customer. So it kind of depends, but great questions. All right. So the other thing at SBIR.gov is companies can look through and look at each of these agencies. Many of these agencies have their own website that has even more up-to-date information than the SBIR.gov. SBIR.gov is hosted by SBA, and it doesn't always have the most up-to-date information. The agency websites have the most up-to-date information, like Health and Human Services, they have their own website. NSF has their own website. And so, they can do their homework there as well. Okay. So they've identified a couple of agencies that actually are interested in the program or in their technology. So, okay, they haven't identified those, they need to go back one step and go through that process and identify them. And then if they have they talked to anybody at that agency? Have they confirmed that they're still interested? Okay, they were interested 2 years ago when they made those awards. Is it still a problem that they're interested in solving? Because if they're not, well, then it's kind of a dead end, right? And it's kind of like the agency's not interested at all. They're not currently interested. They might have been in the past, but they're not now. So, and if they haven't talked with them, then they need to go and talk with the people. So, all right. So the website, when you get the link later, you can, well, SBIR.gov is the website that we're talking about. Okay, question about applications like apps for iOS or Android. Do these work for the agencies? Does this funding only work for agencies, or can it be something that helps the general public too? Again, it depends on the agencies. Some of the agencies like DoD and NASA, they have a specific problem they're trying to solve, and they want to acquire that problem or that solution. And so it needs to really fit their mission. Other agencies like, yeah, thanks. SBIR.gov is in the chat now to the previous question. Other agencies like NSF and NIH sometimes will entertain app development if it's going to solve an important problem. And then you've got to convince the agency that, yes, there is this important problem that your app is going to solve. So it can apply. It just, again, it depends on the agency. Okay, so how does this company, have they confirmed that the agency is actually interested? Well, they don't know. They haven't talked to the agency staff. So what should they say when they contact the agency staff? Well, first of all, they need to do their homework. They need to understand the agency, what that agency's mission/goal is. They should request a short 20-minute phone call. Don't tell them to call them or ask for an hour, because they'll never do that. Okay, the agency staff, they're too busy. They might give you 20 minutes. So have them send a one-pager, whether it's an executive summary or maybe a quad chart. But the key is they need to have a clear value proposition as part of either the executive summary. Okay, here's the problem. Here's our wonderful solution. Here's how ours is better than the existing state of the art, or that will show up on a quad chart. And then it's going to vary a little bit depending on if they're talking to a granting agency or a contracting agency. If they're talking to a granting agency, NSF, NIH, DOE, basically the point is to try to figure out if this solution that they're offering is aligning with the goals and priorities of that agency. If it's a contracting agency, then the goal of this call is to try to learn as much as they can about this problem that they wrote a topic about. So in other words, let's say again, DoD, or we'll go back to NASA. NASA has a couple sensors that need to go on the Mars rover. It's got to do A, B, C, and D. Okay, so you call up and say, okay, I read that topic about the Mars rover. What exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve with this new technology? Because the more that the company can understand the problem, the better they can offer a solution. So in both cases, though, what this person, the company sitting in front of you, when they talk to the agency, this is not a sales call. This is a seek first to understand. I want to learn as much as I can about the agency goal or priorities. If it's a granting agency, if it's a contracting agency, I want to learn as much as I can about understanding the problem that they're trying to solve. And so that means they got to ask some leading questions and then be quiet. The more the agency person talks, the more they can understand. And the more that the company talks, the less that they're going to learn. That's a real temptation. They want to sell their product. This is not a sales call. The proposal is their sales pitch. So this is a learning expedition. Okay, so they figured out that, yes, there's an agency interested. We've confirmed that by talking to the agency staff. Okay, now does this company that's sitting in front of you, do they understand the deadlines and procedures? Okay, depends on, yep, we just saw the solicitations due tomorrow. Well, that's going to be a problem. Okay, it takes time to develop these proposals. So if they don't know, they need to go figure it out. They're going to need to study the FOA, Funding Opportunity Announcement. Each agency calls it something a little different. Some call it FOA, some call it a BAA, some call it solicitation. But it's the rules. Now this is our website. There's a link there that links to a typical annual cycle. Each of these agencies has a typical cycle that they follow. And each of the web pages as well will show that. So they need to go and do their homework, figure that out. So then, okay, they figured out, all right, I got a month or I got 2 months before the deadline. All right, and I got all my registrations complete. Well, you ask the company, have they got them complete? Well, no. If they haven't done that, then they need to get moving today, because some of these registrations can take 6 weeks, up to 6 weeks. The SAM.gov registration can take up to 6 weeks. And so there's some resources that are out there that can help with some of these registrations, like the Small Business Development Center, SBDCs, or Apex Accelerators. By the way, happy Apex Day if there's anybody here from the Apex Accelerators. October 12th is Apex Accelerator Day. And both of these organizations, or neither of them, charge for their services. Both are have a specific mission, but they can help you with these. And if you don't know more, then I'm sure Cara and her team over the next day, or yesterday and today, will have covered enough that you can get connected to those resources. This is just an eye chart, but it's a summary for each of the different agencies. Each agency has its own registrations, right? And NSF has its own website, and DoD has its own website for submitting. So you got to do all these registrations. I'm not going to go through all that. It's just a reference for you. But each of them all require a SAM.gov. And I see for David, it took him 2 months to get his SAM registration active. It can take time. And so you got to plan accordingly. Once you get it initiated, you don't really do much. It just kind of runs in the background, but you have to start it early enough, because all of the agencies require an active SAM registration in order to even apply. So, and a SAM requires an EIN, which comes from the IRS. Now, luckily, that only takes a day or two, and SBIR.gov will take you about 15 minutes. But you need to do all those, or the company needs to do all those things. So now we're going to get down to the team. So the next question is, okay, they got all the registrations done. They verified it. All those other previous questions are yes. Now, does the company have a principal investigator qualified in the state of the art? And if they don't, well, they need to hire somebody on the team that's going to be qualified in the state of the art if they do SBIR, because the SBIR requires that the principal investigator be primarily employed by the small business applicant at least 51% of their time. STTR will allow the principal investigator to either be employed by the company or at the research institute, as long as the researcher at the institute is contributing a minimum amount of time. Now, NSF doesn't allow that exception. So if you're applying to NSF, or the company's applying to NSF, the principal investigator has to be primarily employed by the small business. Now, the principal investigator, who is this? What's that role? The principal investigator is they're the primary contact with the agency. They're the person that's leading the research effort. And generally speaking, this is the person that's the technical expert in the development of this technology. It doesn't always have to be that way. It could be somebody that's more a product development person, that's more of the taking it from the idea and launching a product. But usually it's the technical, what I call the technical wizard, that's the lab person that really knows the technology. But again, there's two requirements. They're independent of one another. The first requirement is where they're employed. The second is how much effort they're contributing to the project. Where they're employed, we kind of covered that. Got to be the small business for SBIR. The second requirement is they have to contribute a minimum amount of effort to the project, and that's going to vary by agencies, generally around 10%. Okay, so they need to have an investigator. Now, okay, couple questions. Can a disadvantaged business certificate help? Maybe. It's not going to affect grading of the proposal itself. In other words, if they don't do, it's already a small business set aside, SBIR, STTR. If two proposals are equally, they're trying to decide between two different proposals, and one has got a disadvantaged business certificate and the other one doesn't, then probably nobody will admit to this officially, but my sense is they'll take the one that's got their certificate. But it's not going to make it more competitive. There's not like extra points or anything. But if it comes down to two and they have to choose between the two, they'll probably take the one with the certificate over the one that didn't have one. And so how is the principal investigator's employment verified? Great question. Self-certification. So you're going to certify, and when you receive the award, when the company receives the award, they're going to certify, yes, I'm the principal investigator. I certify under penalty of perjury that I'm going to be employed, and there's some certain definition of that. And depending on the agency, some agencies allow, second part of your question, a side hustle, some don't. So it just depends on the agency. This is one area where you can get in trouble. If you certify under penalty of perjury that you're going to be, employed by this small business, and then you're not, people go to jail for that. Okay, so it's self-certification. Nobody's going to, the agency's generally not going to check up on you unless maybe you got a disgruntled employee. I've heard of that happening before. We had a client several years ago here at BBC where the husband certified that he was working, and then he went through a nasty divorce, and the wife called up the hotline and said, hey, you know what, by the way, he never did work for the company. He stayed at his university position, and so he had to end up paying back that money. But anyway, so it's self-certification, but it is perjury if you lie. Okay. And then how does the 10% minimum work? Well, if you've got a 40-hour week, the 10% is 4 hours. So you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to contribute at least 4 hours per week to this. If that agency requires 10%, some agencies require a little more, some a little less. I just use that as an example, but that's how they define it. And they always define it on a 40-hour week, despite the fact I've never met an entrepreneur that worked a 40-hour week, but that's how they define it. All right, the rest of the team. Does the company have the rest of the team to do, complete this research? And if they don't, then they need to identify those people and get them on board the team. And they could be contingent upon the award. In other words, you don't have to hire the people just to apply. You could say, well, we're gonna hire Jane, Jim, and Judy once we get the award, but and here's their qualifications, but we don't have to pull the trigger until we get that award. So there's lots of different places. There's 4 different pools of people you can pull from. Employees, W-2, consultants, that's 1099. So a 1099 for SBIR purposes is going to be considered a consultant, not a contract employee. Okay. Employees are W-2. They can be part-time W-2, but they are W-2. A subcontractor is a different organization that you hire. So in other words, a company or a lab or a university, but you get their equipment and their people in addition to and facilities in addition to their people. Whereas a consultant, all you get is their expertise. Just get the person. Advisors are generally unpaid, but are an important part of the team. What are the 4 or 5 roles that you absolutely should have? This company should have these 5 roles, or they're not going to be competitive at SBIR. Technical. Obviously, this is technical development, so you have to have the technical wizard. But you also need product development person, somebody on the team that's taken ideas to a product launch, because that's a very specific skill set. And the whole point of SBIR, STTR, is to launch a product. So you got to have people that know how to do product development. Customer discovery, that's your business development people. Intellectual property, got to have an IP attorney at least on call. You may need, and not always is this required, but if the company's operating in a regulated environment, they need to have a regulatory expert. Got to have somebody on the team that knows how to fundraise, hopefully, preferably from a technology startup environment in the past. And then somebody's got to manage. You got to have the cat herder, right? The person that's going to manage the team. And don't forget, you're going to get a government award here, so somebody needs to know how to handle a government award. So that's a well-rounded team. Now, a lot of times, one person will wear many of those hats. That's okay, especially early stage companies. It's fine. Okay, does the company have a preliminary phase 1 plan? They don't. They need to be able to define technical feasibility and define objectives. These are the technical objectives they have to reach in order to prove feasibility. These are not just a bunch of tasks. These are goals that have a measurable endpoint with a defined success criteria, so that you can tell whether they've proved feasibility. Objectives should be written something like, we have to prove A, we have to demonstrate B, we have to establish C, something like that. Complete, achieve. These are objectives. Tasks, on the other hand, are things that you're going to undertake. We're going to study, we're going to collect some data, we're going to experiment, we're going to test, we're going to measure. Those are all tasks. So here's a quick example of an objective. You're going to demonstrate a novel process is capable of producing some new widget. And there's a specific measurable success measure. Greater than 75% are going to have some property better than this current state of the art. Here are the tasks that we're going to undertake to prove this. We're going to design it, shake it down. Let's confirm key functions. We're going to produce some samples. We're going to break them. We're going to measure the results. We're going to perform our statistical analysis to then conclude whether or not 3/4 of those 100% or those 100 samples met our success measure. And if they did, great, we're going to claim success. If only 50% made it, then we got to go back and refine. So that's how they got to be able to define technical objectives that will define success with clear success measures. Okay. If they can't do that, they need to go back and rewrite it. Does this meet the budget guidelines? Okay. Well, as I mentioned before, SBIR and STTR have specific budget requirements. So they got to be able to take those examples that we just did. Okay, this is how much it's going to take to design it. This is what it's going to do to shake down the system. And then these are all the costs. I'm using NSF SBIR as an example. NSF will give up to 275. We pull out the percentages of those that are, the work that was subcontracted. This is to a previous question. How do they, how do we determine that? We do the math, we pull that out, and it's 32%, so we're in good shape. Has somebody else read the proposal? If not, you need to get somebody else to read your proposal, because somebody that can the problem is you're so head down and you're caught up in all of the details, you can't tell if it makes sense or not. It makes sense to you because you wrote it, or the company has wrote it. And if they haven't gotten somebody else to read it, they need to get somebody to read the proposal to give them input. And if all those things are yes, they're a good fit. Couple other questions to ask them. I've already talked about they can't be a virtual company. They have to actually have facilities. They have to have people. They can't be virtual. Are they willing to comply with detailed requirements? Because there's reporting requirements. Can they articulate the R&D and product? Is the money worth it? I mean, sometimes the timelines, it's going to take 3 years to get to the end of phase 2. That might be too long. They may be a market opportunity that doesn't fit for them. Are they going to be willing to wait at minimum 3 months, probably closer to 6 to 12 months to learn if they're going to get funded? That may not work. And then maybe are they even willing to put up with a very competitive process, less than 20%, less than 1 in 5. Oftentimes it's closer to 10% success rate for phase 1. They may not be willing to put up with that. So if all those questions are a yes, then they're a good fit. And that's really how we evaluate whether somebody's a good fit for the program or not. We've got 2 minutes. I think we've already answered all the questions. The rest of the slides that will be available. If you'd like to work with us, we can help out. Appreciate your all the good questions that came in. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Kara in case there's any other turnover that you want to make. Quick break, whatever. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you and hope to see you in the future in person.
Thank you so much, Jerry. That was a fantastic presentation. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things about BBC ETC. They have this fantastic series called From the Source's Mouth, where you can hear directly from the agencies themselves some of the more specifics of their programs. Definitely check out their website. And I know you guys have another event next week, so check out their website, and Jerry may post some of that into the chat. One of the key points that Jerry made was that you should talk to the program officers. So Jerry, thank you again so much for being here, and we will see you all at the very next session.